play, playing against Mike Shippy, playing Punishing Jund.
This is one of the best matchups in the room for Feline, I'm sure. A deck without much in the way of pressure, not really any significant disruption.
When we were in Providence, playing for top 8, Longmore got to play against Jund, won quite easily.
Yeah. Now, post-board, it's a little bit of a different story here. Mike gets access to 2 Duresses, 2 Mind Break Traps, and 3 copies of Pyroblast. Those are real cards for the matchup.
Absolutely they are.
But game 1, he has very little in the way of relevant cards. Basically, just his 3 copies of Hidden Torak and his 4 Thoughtseizes. That's not enough disruption to get it done.
Counterbalance trigger will be on the stack here. Time Spiral is going to go to the grip, and now we're going to reveal top to take care of the Deathrite Shaman. So Shippy will lose that. Now Longmore will redraw the top, play the top. The hand right now is Candelabra of Tawnos and Time Spiral.
This is an interesting addition. We've seen Feline playing the deck built this way for a while with a bunch of Divining Tops in the main deck and then sideboarding a variety of counterbalances to try to lock out opponents who are relying on cheap disruption.
That's a high tide that is revealed there to counter duress. But what Longmore needs right now is just lands.
Yeah, I think that what Mike was trying to do is set up that turn so Feline would have to put the counterbalance on top of the deck, and in response he could Pyroblast the counterbalance. So Feline finding a 1-coster in the top 3 is really bad for Mike's angle of attack here. And now the Pyroblast doesn't even stop high tide because Feline will have top counterbalance backup.
Yeah, I've seen her go to this quite a bit in sideboarded games. Again, she's been doing this for about a month now.
Yeah.
Debuted this at Somerset, but I've seen her going to this in a lot of sideboarded games. I don't know which matchups it's perfect in. It does seem like it's pretty good in this matchup, though.
Definitely opponents with Duress, Thoughtseize, and Pyroblast as their disruption with not much in the way of a clock. This is going to be a good sideboard strategy.
Dark Confidant being placed onto the stack. We're going to spin the top. See if she can find it, too. Again, right now, it's all about just lands. She finds lands. She's already got a high tide. She can just get going.
I think land number 4, and she would be good to go.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. You could just see, you know, land number 4, cast high tide, cast time spiral, probably be able to go from there. But again, the thing is, she's an 18, so I don't think there's much of a reason to do that. Like, I think she can continue to build up a little bit more.
For sure.
You know, that Dark Confidant is slightly threatening, but not the scariest thing in the world. Gonna respin the top here. One thing that's got to be pretty nice is that if you're Longmore and people don't know about your sideboarding plan, you know, part of the reason that Jund is such a good deck is because of Abrupt Decay, and you have to imagine those are sideboarded out.
Yeah, he does have a lot of pretty bad cards in the matchup here. He also has Punishing Fires, a Maelstrom Pulse, but I agree with you, it's very likely to be sideboarded out, and if that's the case, he doesn't have that many ways to break out.
It's time for a high tide. So Islands will be tapping for blue. So you see Longmore going to put the 2 on that island. If you've never seen this before, it is actually pretty fun to watch. So now those will untap and tap via Candelabra, and now we'll have a Time Spiral. So it looks like there is just 1 blue mana left. This is a Pyroblast. Trigger the counterbalance. You can draw a card with top. To counter this, looks a little unsure.
Maybe she is trying to recall if there was a 1 on top. Because the minimum scenario here is even if Feline has to move the top, at least the top's no longer in play, which is valuable for her.
And so now top will counter the Pyroblast. And Shippy with just 1 card left. It's a Mind Break Trap. Interesting.
So 2 copies of this in the sideboard. You don't see a lot of these floating around anymore.
It's going to reveal top, of course, but this should take care of that. Of course, if an opponent casts 3 or more spells in the turn, the first spell was High Tide. The second spell was Time Spiral.
No, there hasn't been a 3rd spell.
And there hasn't. I don't believe there's been a 3rd spell, so
yeah,
we will hold that really quickly. But it says if the opponent has cast 3. So that doesn't look to be a legal play.
Because the counterbalance activation doesn't count as a spell.
Of course,
it's only the High Tide that got cast.
Can we stop the game? Attention to it, John players. Your scenes for your skill event are up on the 8th release.
So yeah, it looks
to the left of the stage. Please go and look at your scenes and
Looks like we're gonna have to get this figured out now because I don't believe a third spell was cast that turn. We may have moved too far. But I already have a feeling I know what the ruling's going to be here, which is the game has gone on too far.
Right.
And there's no way to unwind this.
Yeah, it's only opponent cast spells. Otherwise, you probably would have seen a lot more of this card showing up in random decks.
Absolutely. The mind trap is there, and I mean.
So you see at the top here, revealed to take care of the Thoughtseize. It was Mike's copy of Mind Trap.
Yeah, Mind Trap took care of Time Spiral. What are we doing? Well, here is a top and a polluted delta, so it looks like time has gone much too far past in this game to reassemble that board position.
So it looks like play stopping here momentarily while we check this out. And again, the Divining Top counterbalance activation does not count as a spell.
Of course.
Just a trigger from the counterbalance.
Yep.
So the only spells Feline cast that turn were a High Tide and a Time Spiral.
Yeah. But as we mentioned, at this point, Dark Confidant, Shippy has already taken his turn. Longmore replayed at top, so there's no going back.
We're several turns
Yeah,
past.
we're several turns past now. And we have seen things like this happen before, a simple misunderstanding of the rules by both players. So while we do try to catch things as quickly as we can, the players had moved on much too quickly.
Yeah, once they keep going, we can only back up so far.
Yeah.
And we're,
Then you're at the judge's discretion, not our discretion here in the booth.
Right, Mike took a turn, then Feline took a turn, then Mike took a turn.
Yep.
And Feline, reconfirming here. It does not count Mike's spells.
Yep.
So that Pyroblast isn't added to the count. So we'll see momentarily. What's getting adjudicated here? I would imagine at minimum a warning.
Yeah, I think that there would be a warning adjudicated, as you mentioned. But there's no rewinding of the game that can take place at this point.
Yeah. We need to have like a panic button in situations like this.
Yeah.
We need to stop. So we'll see if Mike's able to slog through here, this Divine Top and this counterbalance.
And there's going to be a Liliana counterbalance trigger.
And Feline's got a lot of looks at threes here. She can shuffle with the fetch line that she has in play, even assuming that she misses.
Now there's a blue Sunset, so there is a rather unique 3.
Success.
Now, I'm not sure that's the 3. I can't imagine that's the 3 that she wants to draw, however. So here come 2 copies of Dark Confidant.
We may see a reconfiguration. We may see a shuffle here off the fetch land.
Yeah. Just a reshuffling of the top and then drawing a card. And oddly enough, even though Longmore is pretty behind in this game now, all it really takes is a High Tide plus a Time Spiral.
Yeah, and Mike's not really presenting a lot in the way of disruption here.
Yeah.
A lot of his disruptions also shut off by Counterbalance Divine Top. Again, 7 discard spells, 3 Pyroblasts. Hard for him to get anything going, really. And once, if Feline's able to keep the Divining Top in play, the only relevant disruption that Mike has while Feline's going off are the 2 Mind Break traps.
Yep. So this will be a discard spell. Gonna spin top here. See, Force Will, Blue Sun Zenith, and Mystery card. Gonna sacrifice the fetch land.
And the absolute worst case scenario here is Feline ends up putting the top on top of her deck.
Yep.
So she would prefer to keep it in play because it's additional insurance, but.
And we're gonna spin these cards yet again. There's a Time Spiral among them. There's also a High Tide there too. So we might actually see the fireworks here again in just a moment. There's Brainstorm.
And Force of Will back up too in all of this.
Yeah.
So
There's Tarmogoyf. Gonna spin. Yeah, I believe those 3 cards are Brainstorm, High Tide, and Time Spiral. Looks like maybe there's an island there, though. I may have misread there.
In which case, as you mentioned, we could see the fireworks next turn.
Yeah. Here's an attack for 4. Longmore's going to go down to 7. And Shippy has used most of his mana for the turn, so we're going to see a spin at the top one more time. It's okay, so the one card that's not there is High Tide. There's a Brainstorm, there's a Time Spiral, and there's an island.
Feline is compelled to do something next turn because she is facing lethal.
Yes.
And she elected not to force a will the Tarmogoyf too, which means I think she's planning on, I would imagine planning on going for it this turn. Or the Cunning Wish in hand allows her some path to ignore combat this turn.
You hope so. Because Shippy's not going to die from Dark Confidants. That's not going to happen in this situation.
It is impossible, even if it's 2 copies of Bloodbraid Elf.
Okay, so now it's going to be a search for High Tide. You can cast High Tide. Candelabra can untap 2 lands. So there's 2 lands that get untapped.
She's played a land this turn. So she can't top. She can't top for a land drop.
Yep. I'm going to cast Brainstorm. 1, 2, and 3. I don't think that's going to help. Play top. Yeah, shrug the shoulders and just die to what's on board. So Mike Shippy is going to win game number 2 here. We'll be headed to a 3rd one between High Tide and Punishing Judd.
Still got to be pretty comfortable with the matchup of Feline.
Yeah, I agree. I think the matchup is fantastic.
That game can't feel good, obviously.
Yeah, just the way things have broken in the mid-game there, you cannot be too thrilled with that. But I still think that things are positive here for High Tide.
Yeah.
Doesn't take a lot for it to go off. And if you're able to establish topless counterbalance, I think we could see basically a repeat of the last game that we saw.
It's just very hard for him to break out. Although looking at Mike's sideboard there, I didn't really see any copies of Abrupt Decay in his 15. So it's possible they were kept in the matchup. And some of that might just be a concession. You know, there's a lot of cards with really little utility. So maybe
a lot of bad cards in his deck, but I agree with you.
Maybe tags a Candelabra.
Yeah.
Nothing else, you know?
I think at this point you probably bring Decay back in.
Oh, I think that might have already been in his deck, and now that we've seen Counterbalance, there's no question about it. He's got cards that are worse.
But has not gone back to the drawing board at all. It's just been shuffling. So must be happy with the configuration.
Well, I think he kept the Abrupt Decays in for game 2.
Sure.
Is the issue.
Well, I still think that things are positive here for Longmore and High Tide. We have seen her beat Judd many times in the past. And as you mentioned right at the top, the Punishing Judd version is much worse against combo decks than any version of Judd.
Yes.
So you have to imagine that this is a positive matchup, ignoring what happened in that second game.
But a lot of discard post board. You know, Feline can, of course, fight that with Brainstorms or Counterbalance or what have you, but he can get very disruptive draws.
See a couple of lands there in Flooded Stranded Island. There's a Ponder, there's a Forcible. There's some good cards there. I imagine this has to be a pretty fast keep. And there is a Ponder. So a couple of cards to look at. A couple of cards to consult. You saw in Shippy's hand, he has at least one Pyroblast.
I don't know if he has any discard spells, however.
Verdant Catacombs, going to go down to 19 pretty quickly. See if maybe a discard or a Deathrite Shaman. It's going to be a Deathrite Shaman.
And keep in mind, High Tide can only win the game so fast. Turn 3 is the absolute earliest, and more realistically, it's turn 4. Think of it as being a turn slower than Elves. Elves is occasional, best draw, turn 2. Pretty reliable turn 3.
Always turn 4. Always, always, always turn 4.
Well, some of the draws it has no payoff cards.
I would say that Elves is always a turn 4 combo deck. Like, if it doesn't have a payoff card, you kept a bad hand.
Correct. Oh, yeah, that's true. But people do that.
Well, yes.
Just constantly.
Yes.
I mean, just constantly.
That does happen. This is a brainstorm. I have no rebuttal.
That's a defining characteristic of Magic.
It is true. It is true. I'm guilty. I'm guilty of doing it quite a bit. A Force of Will looks like it's going to be on the Dark Confidant. That one's pretty important, so not going to let that one resolve, it looks like.
Though, Mike is reaching the point here where he's going to be able to untap with multiple Pyroblasts. He can't make a land drop, so he may still feel like he needs to get a threat into play, but could be tough for Feline if he just holds up 1 red mana.
Time to Merchant Scroll. And it will be High Tide. Again, I think it's tough if he holds up 100 mana, but again, Longmore is in no rush. So it's only tough if she tries to go too quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah, and now the Deathrite doesn't even make mana, which is tough. I mean, are you just attacking for 1 and saying go? It seems rough to win the game that way.
Yeah. I'm just going to pass the turn here with the ability, of course, to remove something. But I think this only goes poorly if there's a rush here, and there should be no rush, in my opinion, to go off. You're at 19. Your opponent has 1 land and a Deathrite Shaman. You're aware of the cards that could potentially be played here, which are Pyroblast, potentially discard spells, and or Mindbreak Trap.
Yeah.
That's really it. And given that your opponent has not done anything in the opening turns of the game, I think it's safe to try to put them on a read of Mindbreak Trap. There's a fetch line for Shippy, a pretty important one, actually. Now it turns Deathrite back on, so Marshflat's going to go to the bin. Take 1 to do so, and we'll see what land he does search up. It's going to be a Badlands.
Really important for Mike here to find that second land. It was, Feline has so many cards and so many cantrips in her deck that allow her to assemble a hand, then go off through 1 Pyroblast. 2 Pyroblasts, a much different story. But how many shields are, how low is Mike willing to drop his shields here? Not even willing to add a 2-mana spell to his board and, keep up 1 Pyroblast. Doesn't feel safe doing that.
Just some reactive cards over there, that's it.
Yeah.
See the hand of Time Spiral and High Tide, so the 1-2 punches there. This is going to be a Zenith just from 1. See if Shippy wants to counter this. Not a great spell to counter. This is definitely a test spell.
Yeah, I don't feel like this is the one you want to be fighting.
Yeah. There we go. Zenith will shuffle back in.
How do you feel about a random card off of my deck?
No.
Absolutely not.
Candelabra was that random card that was drawn. Now there's a counterbalance. Now that one's worth countering.
This is a great test spell.
Yes. Shippy does not want that to resolve, so that'll get countered. There's going to be a brainstorming response.
By brainstorming response, I think Feline's saying that she's willing to fight on this if she has the opportunity to do so.
There's a Flusterstorm. So the Storm count, there's a couple spells there.
And Flusterstorm's another great test spell.
Yep. Flusterstorm was going to take care of that, and now the Pyroblast can take care of this. But that gets 2 Pyroblasts out of the hand, and I think you got to be thrilled with that exchange.
Yeah.
So now the coast is pretty clear.
Being able to bleed out 2 copies of Pyroblast on non-essential elements is just a huge victory for Feline. No 2 ways about it.
Yeah, Shippy with a fetch land here.
And now she's in a position next turn to just go High Tide Time Spiral. Doesn't even matter if Mindbreak Trap's in the mix.
Yep.
Or at least we hope.
And now here's Liliana. And the discard here you have to imagine is going to be Candelabra.
Yep. I'm sure she would have liked to keep it. Trying to go off in this spot is not the safest, but still.
Pithing Needle will be discarded there by Shippy.
Now, things get much easier for Feline next turn.
And there's another copy of Deathrite Shaman. So the shields are down, and don't even have to worry about Mindbreak traps. So yeah, High Tide's going to get cast immediately. And now there's a Time Spiral. So.
And that was a pretty dangerous play there by Mike playing the second Deathrite Shaman. In the event that he just said go in response to the Time Spiral, he could have made a mana out of his graveyard, added a red, and at least had the hope of drawing Pyroblast.
Yeah.
Now, the only things that he has in his deck that matter are 2 copies of Mindbreak Trap.
Yep. And truth be told, those, unless Longmore draws a pretty bad 7, Mindbreak Trap typically when this deck is going off doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it's significant, but it's not something that she can't work around.
Yeah. So 7 cards each coming. And again, Longmore's Islands are going to tap for 2 right now. So 8 mana available. This will be the first land. So did not play a land to begin things. So no more lands for the turn. And now it's time to start really going. It's going to be a Merchant Scroll right now. That's going to resolve. Have to imagine it's going to be a High Tide that she's searching for. Start to generate even more mana. So there is High Tide. Again, the Storm count in this situation likely not going to matter. It's mostly going to be about Blue Sun Zenith here.
And if you haven't watched Feline before, you're getting a lesson here about her speed with the operations of this deck.
Yep.
The die there on the island, of course, representing how much blue each of them generate.
Yep. So here's the Ponder with the last leftover mana. So you're going to take a look at things here. There's a Cunning Wish hiding out in that hand. You might see a shuffle with the Ponder. It's going to be a keeper. This will be 3 blue. There's a top. There's a Merchant Scroll. No blue left. Time to go searching yet again. Consult that grip.
Just confirming mana floating and what have you.
And nothing floating right now. Normally it's pretty straightforward what to search for. A little bit more difficulty here. But there's a Time Spiral. Okay. And so this is going to be a Time Spiral with no mana floating and searching for Force of Will just to make sure that nothing stupid happens involving Mindbreak Trap. And that's exactly why there was a search for Force of Will, and there's a blue card. So it forces Shippy to have another copy of Mindbreak Trap right now.
And again, only 2 in his list, so it's asking a lot.
So again, the spell count is something that Shippy is keeping track of with those dice. Realistically, again, that's not really going to matter. Yes, she does have a Brain Freeze kill, but most of the time it is involving Blue Sun Zenith targeting the opponent for the full amount, whatever the full amount may be. So Time Spiral number 2 is where we are.
Yeah, and Brain Freeze isn't even more stable in this scenario because of Mindbreak Trap being the way that Mike has to defend himself.
Yep. So again, all those islands are going to tap for 3, so there's access to 15 mana. Longmore's already played the land for the turn. There's a Ponder, 2 floating.
Mike did not find a Mindbreak Trap, so he is at the mercy of whatever Feline can do this turn.
Now it's a Brainstorm. 2 cards are going to go back very quickly. You see 2 copies of Force of Will. Now there's a Merchant Scroll, 2 floating again. Time to go searching.
And she has Flusterstorm as well in this hand, so...
The backup is, is there. You know, it's very easy to go off through Mindbreak Trap for this deck between Flusterstorm and Force of Will. Looks like we're going to go for a High Tide here.
Yeah, I always found Mindbreak Trap to be a little bit overrated against them because they can go off in a lot of turns by just High Tide Time Spirals. Your Mindbreak Trap doesn't work. And usually they're so redundant while they're going off that it doesn't provide you a lot of defense.
Yeah, against this particular deck, they just don't care. It's going to be Cunning Wish. I imagine it's going to be getting a Turnabout and untap all the lands. So that's what will happen here. Turnabout will untap everything. There's a Counterbalance as well. And now Turnabout will untap all the lands. So a mini lock being put in place. Brainstorm being brought forward. We might see Zenith here. This will be a Zenith for some number of cards. That'll be 5. Shuffle that back in. Longmore doing what she does, going off.
And this is why she's allowed to be on camera and most high tide players are not.
Yep.
Because this is a hard game, a hard deck to play quickly. You can see now Feline separating her hand into this matters and this doesn't kind of territory.
Yeah, the this doesn't territory or counter spells and lands, and these do are Brainstorm, which is counterbalance, and a couple of cards. Here can put back some of the garbage. There's a Merchant Scroll there as well. Don't know if there's some trouble here or not. There's Merchant Scroll. Searching very quickly, looking for something specific. It's not high tide. You see one at the front. Can't search for Time Spiral.
Can she Merchant Scroll here for Cunning Wish and Cunning Wish for Brain Freeze?
Potentially. Depends how many wishes are left in the deck. And there's, of course, a Brain Freeze on the board. You don't normally see this kind of difficulty when she's going off.
Yeah, usually.
There's some second guessing going on here. Gonna search for a high tide.
I'm surprised that mana could possibly be the bottleneck here.
Yeah.
Attention Magic players, that is time.
Gonna spin top.
Active player, please finish your turn and take 5.
A couple of decent cards to look at.
Need help, please call our coach.
That is not a face of someone who's going to be going off this turn, I don't think.
This may be a fizzle.
Yeah, we don't see this often. It's a wipe away on Liliana. Now another copy of Counterbalance. Wow.
The rare fizzle.
Yes. I am genuinely surprised. This is the first time I've ever covered a match by Longmore when she's going off and doesn't kill the opponent.
Yeah, now that doesn't mean she's dead.
Yes.
I mean, she can just reassemble even as early as next turn. She has a high tide, force will to protect herself, counterbalance, Divine Top blocks out most of the disruption.
This is a Thoughtseize. 2 triggers for counterbalance. First trigger will be a Brainstorm, so 1 mana spells are not going to work.
And you can see his hand, I mean, Mike's hand is just Dark Confidant here, Bolt.
Yeah, I mean, mostly rubbish.
Yeah, things that don't really matter all that much.
Now, Deathrite Shaman can certainly play an interesting role in this game because it can remove cards from the graveyard that don't get shuffled back in with Time Spiral. So that's actually one of the more interesting cards that takes place in this game. Longmore going to draw a card. It's that Brainstorm that we knew about. There's an island. And this is a Ponder. Of course, these islands are tapping for an honest 1 mana this go around. So nothing crazy going on. You know, there's the real potential here that Counterbalance maybe dilutes the deck a little bit.
Well, definitely the second copy is not doing a lot of work. Now, it has protected her from a lot of Pyroblasts and Thoughtseizes. This matchup, it seems good, but it's not a freebie.
So we want to turn 3. Deathrite Shaman going to remove some things in the graveyard here. So Deathrite Shaman does go active twice, goes to 13, does Longmore. Pyroblast looks to be the draw, but again, not great in this situation just because of topless counterbalance.
And now, it seems like Feline's got to just go for it. I mean, of course, she's entering turn 4 of turns here, so.
I mean, not much of a choice, right? 2 counterbalance triggers. That's a high tide. And spin here. There's a counterbalance in those cards, it looks like. Also a Candelabra.
So she can trigger the first counterbalance, let it resolve, and then trigger the second counterbalance.
Yep, counter that. I think there's a real ability to go off here soon. I mean, it has to go for it next turn. With a high tide and Candelabra, mana will not be the bottleneck, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
That's actually the easy part.
It's just, is there a Time Spiral?
Longmore does have a fetch land in her hand. So it can reset top if necessary. So there's the delta. This is a high tide. probably going to see a Pyroblast here, but you know that's going to get countered. Yeah, so first one, there's Candelabra, so that counters that.
Stings.
Yep.
I think Mike was hoping to at least get the Divining Top out of play.
So, we'll be tapping for 2 blue now. It's time to try to go again, another high tide. As you mentioned, have to try to win.
Yep.
There's a Brainstorm. There's a couple of cards. Third one down was an Island. Knew the top 2 were Counterbalancing Candelabra. Of course, can put back 2 cards here. Looks like maybe Flusterstorm and Island. Those aren't of much help. You have to imagine there's some interest in resetting things.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
and spin top, look one more card deeper. Not a Time Spiral, so sacrifice the fetch land.
she gets a lot of looks at it potentially.
Yep.
The spiral decks are so redundant, you know, so many cantrips.
Spin one more time. Spiral's the
There
top
it
card of the
is.
deck. That's a sigh of relief. Time to draw a card. There's Spiral. Gonna cast another Counterbalance. And now gonna cast Time Spiral. Part of the reason casting Counterbalance there is just make sure it doesn't get shuffled back in.
Yeah, every draw, you know, every draw matters at this point. Mana's not going to be an issue, so just thin that counterbalance out of the deck.
Deathrite Shaman. Going to remove High Tide, it looks like. And Time Spiral gets to untap all those lands in just a second. Here we go. All these islands are going to be tapping for 3. So again, I don't think that mana is going to be the bottleneck. It's
Mike
just the cards in the deck.
Mike does get another spin at Mind Break Trap. He gets another spin at Pyroblast, which may or may not matter.
Mm-hmm. But there are definitely some bad draws here for Longmore.
Yeah.
A lot of counter magic left in the deck.
And I'm curious what prevented her from being able to win the game the last time we got into this spot.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Both players are going to give it a good hearty shuffle here. Feel like you're in control of your own destiny when you shuffle in the deck, hoping for the right cards.
Here in Las Vegas, give it a wash.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a top. And a top.
And Mike has found a Mind Break Trap, so he has something to do this turn.
There's a Ponder. 3. Looks like Merchant Scroll among the cards. There's also a Candelabra over there. Remember, Time Spirals do not get shuffled back in. They exile themselves upon resolution.
For power level concerns. Because, you know, we'd be worried about it being too powerful if you kept shuffling into the deck.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying makes sense.
Yeah.
Here's a Merchant Scroll. Shippy says that's fine. So searching up a blue instant. Gonna get a Zenith.
Not a bad one.
It's time to add a bunch of mana. This will be 15, untap some lands here. So now some more mana. This is a Blue Sun Zenith. I think this is a good time to pull the trigger on that. And it looks like perfectly content with letting that go, maybe? We'll see. Might have a little fight over this.
Probably at least worth the spin of a top.
Yeah. See if there's a 4 to counter this. Turnabout is a magic card after all.
Yep.
Looks like maybe found a Flusterstorm.
Yep.
Did.
That'll do it.
You want to check the storm with that Flusterstorm?
Yeah, don't worry, it's a lot.
Yeah.
You don't have enough.
Yeah.
I
I
don't know.
promise. Bunch of cards added. Zenith's going to get shuffled back in. And I think it should be academic from here. I think something would have to go horribly wrong. And here's the split of the cards. Time Spiral goes in the other pile. A little surprising to me. See Time Spiral in the pile of cards that don't matter.
Well, I think these are the cards that facilitate killing you right now.
Okay.
And then these are the cards that don't. So the counter spells, the time spirals, those go over there.
See, It's a couple of high tides being cast right now. So these islands are tapping for a boatload of mana. Wipe Away is going to target Candelabra. Top's going to come into play. Candelabra's going to untap all these lands. Yeah. Now the mana is something I'm not going to try to keep track of anymore because it simply doesn't matter. Now it's time to cast a Brainstorm. Found a Blue Sun Zenith. Going to put a couple of cards back. There you do see Blue Sun. Maybe looking for a Cunning Wish for Brain Freeze. We'll see.
She has a counterspell even in all this too. So
gonna cast a Merchant Scroll, pick up the old deck. Searching for something specific, assuming that it's there. That's a double check. That's just going to Brainstorm. So maybe thinking that something was there that wasn't.
yeah, I don't think if she has no mana floating right now, she's a tad bit short, I think, of killing Mike through the Zenith. 7 times 5 is 35. So yeah, maybe needs one more on tap effect, like Candelabra or some such.
That's 20.
Well, she can just Zenith for the rest of her deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep it so Zenith is just the last card.
Yeah. Or leave 3 Zenith and 2 other cards in the deck so she can Brainstorm for the last piece or whatever the case.
Yep. Whole deck and grip, Zenith is the only card.
I guess Divining Top also helps here. Whatever. I mean, I wouldn't get too hung up on the details.
Yep. Candelabra's going to come in. Candelabra's going to come in. Those are the 2 big waves of untapping, I think, that are necessary to get it done. With the counterspell backups and Force Will and blue cards, now we're going to be able to generate those waves of mana.
Right. This is you know, this is what you get for that Mind Break trap. Is Feline gets to do some Globetrotter stuff to you.
Yep. Top will draw a card. There's a Blue Sun Zenith. You see all this storm count. It says, how about an actual million towards you? And that is going to do it. Feline Longmore is going to win this match over Mike Shippy. 2-1. High Tide takes down Punishing Jun and a smile on her face.
Yeah, I mean, what a relief, right? That game was, I mean, to have the game 2 go the way that it did, and then, you know, game 3, it looks like you're going to go off and then fizzle.
Yep.
Very stressful match for Feline, especially, you know, as the tournament progresses, she's going to run into more